Vince McMahon killed legends, not in the ring, but backstage through pure hatred and jealousy. WWE took the most feared monsters in wrestling history and turned them into complete jokes. From main eventing WrestleMania to wrestling in comedy matches with midgets. From being unstoppable monsters to getting their pushes killed simply because Shawn Michaels, Vince's golden boy, didn't like working with them. By the end of this video, you'll be asking the same question every wrestling fan has asked for decades. How did WWE mess up this badly with such legendary talent? First up, Big John Studd. Big John Studd was one of the 80s most monstrous heels who made heroes like Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant look superhuman. In a time where bigger meant better, John pushed his body to extremes, building his frame to a massive 364 pounds through whatever means necessary. But in 1994, doctors gave John devastating news. He had only 1 month to live. On February 19, 1948, John William Minton was born in Butler, Pennsylvania. Before wrestling, he was a military police officer in the U.S. Army, and his massive size definitely helped him keep order. He trained under Killer Kowalski, and this matters because most giants in wrestling could get by on size alone. The fact that John learned from Kowalski, one of wrestling's best trainers, shows he wanted to be more than just another big wrestler. John started wrestling as the Mighty Minton in summer 1972 for NWA Hollywood. A few months later, he moved to the Worldwide Wrestling Federation as Chuck O'Connor, finishing that year with matches against stars like Chief Jay Strongbow and Gorilla Monsoon. John stayed with the WWF until February 1973, took a break from wrestling, then joined Mid-Atlantic in January the next year. When John joined Mid-Atlantic Wrestling, he still used the name Chuck O'Connor. Here, he started doing a lot of team matches. He partnered with wrestlers like Super Destroyer, Ivan Koloff, and Ric Flair. He spent about a year there, doing okay but not great, mostly in team fights. In January 1975, John went to the AWA, still using the name Chuck O'Connor. He had some wins and losses there before heading back to the WWF in 1976. This time, he became Executioner 2, teaming up with Executioner 1, who turned out to be his old trainer, Killer Kowalski. With Captain Lou Albano as their manager, they won the tag team titles in May 1976. The team later added a third member when Nikolai Volkov joined as Executioner 3. John left the Worldwide Wrestling Federation in 1977 to wrestle in Texas NWA promotions, mainly Houston Wrestling and NWA Big Time. During this period, he went by Big John Studd in Big Time Wrestling and Captain USA in Houston. He had several major matches, including a big victory over Bruiser Brody in a Loser Leaves Texas match, where he also won the NWA American Heavyweight title. His success continued as he won the NWA Hawaii Tag titles with Buddy Rose, and when he went back to Mid-Atlantic, he and Ric Flair took the NWA Mid-Atlantic Tag titles from Paul Jones and Ricky Steamboat. John stayed in Mid-Atlantic until 1980 before moving to the AWA, where they booked him as an unstoppable giant who kept beating wrestlers like Dino Bravo and Mad Dog Vachon. After successful runs in Georgia Championship Wrestling and the CWF, where he had some great matches with Dusty Rhodes, Big John Studd joined the WWF in November 1982 for what would become his most famous run. At this time, Andre the Giant was one of the few true giants in the WWF, especially in the early 80s. When John Studd arrived, he towered over most other wrestlers and was booked to crush everyone he faced. Big John Studd made a perfect bad guy. He was huge, mean, and finished matches quickly. Together with his manager Freddie Blassie, he became the perfect monster villain, even bringing a stretcher to his matches for the opponents he would beat up badly. This, of course, would lead to championship opportunities, where Big John Studd would challenge WWF Golden Boy, at the time Bob Backlund, but the matches would typically end via countout or disqualification. This brings us to the Body Slam Challenge. Classy Freddie Blassie and Big John Studd would state that John could not be body slammed. It was an impossible feat that no man could accomplish. Confident in their statements, Blassie and Studd offered 10 grand, later 15 grand, to anyone who could step up and scoop the big man off his feet. Andre the Giant was the one wrestler everyone believed could do it. When Andre tried to slam Studd, Freddie Blassie stepped in to stop him, which started a major money-making rivalry between these two giants. Stud and Andre went on to have many big matches against each other, including battles inside a steel cage. The feud with Andre the Giant launched John's career to new heights. They were bringing in huge crowds, which helped John get more chances to fight for the title. Before the first WrestleMania, Stud had matches against Hulk Hogan that were different from typical championship matches. Usually, everyone knew who would win when Hogan defended his title, but Stud made people wonder if he might actually beat Hogan. John had all the qualities WWF wanted in a villain champion: size, wrestling skill, the right look, and proven ability to draw crowds with Andre. Though he never took the title from Hogan, their matches were solid. They'd actually wrestled before in Japan during a 1983 New Japan Pro Wrestling tour. Funny enough, Andre was there too and even teamed up with Stud, showing how wrestling stories were totally different in Japan than in America. Later, Stud joined Bobby Heenan's group after he and another Heenan member, Ken Patera, got disqualified in a match against Andre the Giant and SD Jones. After that match, Stud and Patera attacked Andre and cut his hair right in the middle of the ring. The haircutting incident was huge at the time. Fans went wild seeing Andre get beaten and humiliated like that. Nobody treated Andre the Giant this way back then, so seeing him embarrassed in the middle of the ring was shocking. To get back at Stud, Andre took on the $15,000 Body Slam Challenge at WrestleMania 1. The stakes were high. If Andre could slam Stud before time ran out and prevent Stud from slamming him first, he'd win the money. But if Andre failed, he'd have to quit wrestling forever. While WWE usually credits WrestleMania 1's success to Hulk Hogan, Mr. T, and the celebrity turnout at Madison Square Garden, and yes, these were crucial in getting media attention, Andre and Stud deserve recognition too. The Body Slam Challenge was a major selling point for WrestleMania in 1985, with fans eager to see if Andre could win the money and get his revenge. The match itself was short but effective. Andre completely overpowered Big John Stud, and when he finally slammed him, the crowd erupted in one of the night's biggest reactions. Andre grabbed the money bag and started throwing cash to the fans. While it wasn't a technical masterpiece, it created a memorable moment that deserves more credit in WrestleMania history. After WrestleMania 1, Stud teamed up with another wrestler from Bobby Heenan's group, King Kong Bundy. Together they formed one of WWE's biggest tag teams ever. Throughout 1985 and into 1986, Bundy and Stud kept fighting Andre the Giant, who brought in various good guy wrestlers to help him fight back. He partnered with stars like Hulk Hogan, Hillbilly Jim, and Junkyard Dog to battle against Stud and Bundy. The team of King Kong Bundy and Big John Stud seems largely forgotten today, which isn't fair given how intimidating they were as a duo. The issue was really with WWF's booking style back then. They focused on sending fans home happy. Bad guys were there mainly to make the heroes look unbeatable, and Bundy and Stud fell into this pattern. While they had their moments when big matches came around, they usually ended up losing. That's just how it worked if you were a villain back then, and both Bundy and Stud played their parts perfectly. But if they'd won more important matches, they'd probably be better remembered today. It's not that heel teams never won in mid-80s WWF. Groups like the Hart Foundation and the Dream Team did well for themselves. But when you were up against stars like Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan, that was a whole different story. You were there to make them look good. While King Kong Bundy got a main event match against Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 2, Big John Stud was part of the famous battle royal that mixed wrestlers with NFL players. Stud played a key role, eliminating William the Refrigerator Perry, but then got thrown out himself after shaking Perry's hand. Andre went on to win the Battle Royal, and Hogan beat Bundy, showing again how the good guys always came out on top. After WrestleMania 2, Bundy and Stud got into a feud with a group called the Machines. Some background here: Andre had missed several matches against Bundy and Stud, which led to Bobby Heenan getting him suspended from WWF. The real story was that Andre's health was getting worse. He was filming The Princess Bride in England, and he wanted to slow down his wrestling career. When Andre came back, he wore a mask and called himself the Giant Machine, supposedly a wrestler from Japan. He teamed up with Super Machine, who was really Bill Eadie. Everyone could tell it was obviously Andre under the mask. He was huge and moved just like Andre. Bobby Heenan kept trying to prove Giant Machine was really Andre, but could never officially prove it. Eventually, Giant Machine disappeared and Andre came back as himself. Since Heenan's group never managed to unmask Giant Machine, they couldn't prove anything, making for some great wrestling storytelling. Near the end of 1986, the WWF started hinting at trouble between Bundy and Studd as they began arguing with each other. This looked like it was building to a match between them at WrestleMania 3. But instead, Studd chose to retire while he was still a major star in the World Wrestling Federation. When Big John Studd came back to WWF in December 1988, people had different theories about why. Some believed he knew about his serious illness and wanted to earn good money before having to quit for good. Others thought WWF brought him back because Andre the Giant was planning to retire, and they needed another giant to fill his spot, though nobody could really replace Andre. The true reason for Studd's 1988 comeback remains a mystery. The Big John Studd who returned in 1989 just wasn't the same wrestler fans remembered. WWF had grown into a company filled with giant wrestlers, so Studd's size wasn't as impressive anymore. What made things tougher was that these new big guys were more agile in the ring than Studd. There was no getting around that fact. Making him a good guy was another problem, especially without someone like Bobby Heenan doing his talking for him. Now, Studd wasn't bad at promos. He could talk fine. But after having Heenan speak for you, anything else feels like a step down. Plus, WWF in 1989 was full of over-the-top characters who were great at talking. Next to them, Studd's style felt old-fashioned. Studd made his comeback on Brother Love's show segment. Bobby Heenan was thrilled at first, thinking Studd would rejoin his group. But Studd refused because Andre the Giant, his old enemy, was now part of Heenan's team. This turned Studd into a good guy with the fans. Studd winning the 1989 Royal Rumble was a big moment in his career, though it was an unexpected choice by WWF. Most people thought Ted DiBiase or Big Boss Man would win. Back then, winning the Royal Rumble didn't get you anything special like it does today. But it was still a huge achievement for Studd, one that fans still remember well. His last big appearance was at WrestleMania 5, where he was the referee for a match between Jake Roberts and his old rival Andre the Giant. The match ended when Andre got disqualified for attacking Studd from behind. A few months later, on June 4th, Studd had his final WWF match. He left the company because he felt he wasn't getting paid enough. Some say he just packed up and left during a live event, never to return. There were rumors that Jim Herd wanted to bring him to WCW after he left WWF. But Studd was tired of all the traveling that came with being a wrestler, so he decided to retire completely. In autumn 1993, when life seemed normal for John, he discovered something concerning: a lump in his armpit. Though it wasn't causing him pain, he wisely decided to have it checked by a doctor. That's when he received devastating news. The doctors discovered a large tumor in his chest. It was cancer, news that shattered John's world. This diagnosis came after years of wrestling in an era that demanded larger-than-life physiques from performers. Like many wrestlers of the 1980s, John had felt pressure to maintain and enhance his impressive size to meet audience and industry expectations. While naturally a large man, the demanding nature of wrestling often led performers like him to use steroids to maintain their size and recover from injuries. The connection between his cancer and steroid use was something John himself would later acknowledge. He developed Hodgkin's lymphoma, which doctors linked to his long-term steroid use, a fact he bravely shared as a warning to others. His friend, superstar Billy Graham, later revealed that John had expressed regret about using steroids, believing they contributed to his illness. It was a tragic consequence of an era when even natural giants felt pressured to push their bodies to dangerous extremes. True to his fighting spirit, John faced cancer head-on and began chemotherapy. The treatment was brutal, but it seemed to be working. The tumor started shrinking, and his condition improved. Doctors became optimistic, even suggesting he might return to wrestling within 6 months. It was a ray of hope during a dark time. But in 1994, the cancer returned aggressively. The doctors recommended a bone marrow transplant as the next step, but they faced a critical obstacle. They couldn't find a matching donor for John. With no matching donor, doctors had to deliver devastating news to John. He likely had only about a month to live. Yet even facing these odds, John's fighting spirit remained unbroken. He opted for an extremely risky procedure called an autotransplantation, which carried just a 7% chance of success. Against incredible odds, the procedure worked. The tumor disappeared and John was able to return home to his family. It seemed like a miracle, and everyone dared to hope he'd beaten cancer for good. But in September 1994, just months after returning home, John suffered another setback when his lungs collapsed, requiring immediate hospitalization. Through it all, John kept fighting with remarkable courage. He returned to the hospital in February 1995 for more chemotherapy, but received heartbreaking news. The cancer had spread throughout his body and treatment options were exhausted. On March 20th, 1995, John passed away peacefully. After fighting cancer with the same determination he showed in the ring, he was laid to rest in Pennsylvania. Big John Studd was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2004, honoring his lasting impact on professional wrestling. Looking back at Big John Studd's career, it's clear why he stands as one of wrestling's most overlooked giants. He played a crucial role in elevating stars like Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. As one of the biggest heels of the mid-'80s, both physically and in character, Studd gave these heroes the perfect opponent to prove themselves against. While Andre and Hogan were already stars before facing Studd, he provided them with some of their most memorable rivalries. Beating someone like Big John Studd meant something. His size and dominance made every victory over him feel significant. Throughout his career, Studd proved his value, from his time with the Executioners to his excellent partnership with Kong Bundy, and especially his profitable feud with Andre the Giant that drew huge crowds everywhere they went. Though his 1988 comeback may not have reached the same heights, Big John Studd's impact on wrestling deserves far more recognition than it receives today. If this look back at Big John Studd's career resonated with you, if you think Big John Studd's Royal Rumble victory being completely wasted was bad, wait until you hear about the monster who went from main eventing WrestleMania to wrestling comedy matches in just 1 year. Next up, Kong Bundy. At over 450 pounds, Kong Bundy moved like a man half his size. At his peak, this monster demanded referees count to 5, because 3 seconds wasn't enough to prove his total dominance. But in 2019, the walking condominium would face his final opponent, and this time, not even a 5 count could save him. In 1955, Chris Allen Pallies was born in Woodbury, New Jersey. Growing up, Chris was always bigger than most kids his age, but he wasn't just big. He was a natural athlete who dominated in amateur wrestling, winning 2 regional championships before graduating in 1974. After high school, Chris headed to Larry Sharp's Monster Factory Wrestling School in Belmar, New Jersey, the place where giants were made. On March 7, 1981, he debuted in the World Wrestling Federation as Chris Kanyon, scoring his first victory against Strong Kobayashi 4 months later. But it was in Texas, with world-class championship wrestling, where Chris Pallies would transform into the legendary Kong Bundy. Chris Pallies started out as Big Daddy Bundy, but that name was just the beginning. Everything changed when he got into a nasty feud with Texas wrestling's royal family, the Von Erichs. That's when he joined forces with the smooth-talking manager Gary Hart, who saw something special in the big man. Hart knew exactly what to do. He rebranded his massive wrestler as Kong Bundy. Just like the famous movie monster, Bundy was huge, intimidating, and impossible to ignore. But sometimes the best things in wrestling happen by accident. During his heated battles with the Von Erichs, Bundy lost his hair in a match. Instead of being a setback, this became his trademark look. That massive, bald head made him stand out from every other wrestler. You couldn't miss Kong Bundy when he walked into an arena. After making his mark in Texas, Bundy hit the road to become an even better wrestler. He traveled across the country, wrestling in different territories and learning new tricks along the way. In the American Wrestling Association, he terrorized their biggest stars. But his biggest achievement during this time came in Georgia Championship Wrestling. There, he teamed up with a mysterious masked wrestler known as the Superstar, and together they did something incredible. They beat the unstoppable Road Warriors for the NWA National Tag Team Championship. The Road Warriors were considered nearly unbeatable, so this was a huge deal. But it was in Mid-South Wrestling where Bundy came up with something that would make him truly unique. He wasn't satisfied with the regular 3-count pin that every other wrestler used. No, King Kong Bundy demanded the referee count to 5. This wasn't just showing off, it was brilliant psychology. Every time he pinned someone for a 5 count, it sent a clear message to everyone watching. I'm not just beating these guys, I'm destroying them. This 5 count became his calling card, something fans would anticipate every time he stepped into the ring. When King Kong Bundy stormed into the WWF on March 16, 1985, everyone knew something huge was about to happen. The WWF had been running promos for weeks, telling fans that a monster was coming. When Bundy finally stepped through the curtain on Championship Wrestling, jaws dropped. Poor Mario Mancini was in the ring, probably wishing he had called in sick that day. What happened next wasn't just a match. It was a demolition that had fans on the edge of their seats. The loud-mouthed manager Jimmy Hart was grinning from ear to ear, knowing he had just unleashed wrestling's newest nightmare on the WWF. But it was at the very first WrestleMania, in the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden, where Bundy really made history. His opponent that night was Special Delivery Jones, a tough veteran who'd been in countless battles. But nobody was ready for what happened next. The bell rang, and before the hot dogs in the concession stand could get cold, it was all over. 9 seconds. That's all it took. Bundy crushed SD Jones in the corner with his brutal avalanche splash, followed by his bone-crushing big splash in the middle of the ring. The referee couldn't count fast enough, even with Bundy demanding his trademark 5 count. Wrestling fans had seen quick matches before, but this was different. This was a statement that echoed through the wrestling world. King Kong Bundy wasn't just big, he was unstoppable. All through the summer of 1985, Bundy left a trail of broken opponents across the country. But everything changed in September when Jimmy Hart made a deal that would shake up the wrestling world. He traded Bundy to the greatest manager in wrestling, Bobby the Brain Heenan. The Brain knew exactly what to do with his new monster. He aimed Bundy right at the biggest target possible, the legendary Andre the Giant. Now, challenging Andre wasn't something wrestlers did lightly. The 7'4" Giant had been undefeated to challenge Andre. He ambushed him during a match and did the unthinkable. He trapped Andre in the corner and delivered splash after devastating splash until Andre's sternum actually cracked under the impact. The message was crystal clear. King Kong Bundy wasn't afraid of giants. He broke them. This wasn't just another wrestling angle. This was the moment Bundy proved he could destroy anyone, no matter how big or legendary they were. The attack on Andre the Giant wasn't just a one-time thing. It kicked off some of the most exciting matches of 1985. Wrestling fans couldn't wait to see these giants clash. It all started heating up on Saturday night's main event, which was a huge deal because wrestling was rarely on network TV back then. On October 3, 1985, everyone tuned in to see an explosive tag team match. In one corner, you had King Kong Bundy teaming up with another giant, Big John Studd. In the other corner stood Andre the Giant, still nursing his injured sternum, alongside the powerhouse Tony Atlas. The building was electric that night. You could feel the tension in the air. But that was just the warm-up. The WWF raised the stakes even higher in the second match when Andre brought in the biggest star in wrestling, the WWF champion himself, Hulk Hogan. Just imagine this scene. Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan, probably the two most famous wrestlers in the world, standing together in one corner while Bundy and Studd, two massive monsters, waited in the other. These matches showed everyone a different side of Bundy. Sure, he was devastating in single matches, but now he was proving he could be just as dominant in tag team action. He wasn't just a solo destroyer. He was a smart wrestler who could work with a partner to take down even the biggest stars in the business. Everything came to a head on September 23, 1985, at the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden. They called it the Colossal Jostle, and that name wasn't just hype. Picture this: Andre the Giant, all 7'4", and nearly 500 pounds of him, finally getting his hands on Bundy one-on-one. The garden was packed. You could say Bundy was just another big guy. He had earned his place among wrestling's elite monsters. After proving he could hang with Andre the Giant, King Kong Bundy had his eyes on an even bigger prize, the WWF Championship around Hulk Hogan's waist. But Bundy didn't just politely challenge Hogan to a match. No, he made a statement that shocked the wrestling world on Saturday night's main event. Together with his massive partner, the Magnificent Morocco, Bundy launched a surprise attack on Hogan that left fans gasping. This wasn't your typical wrestling beatdown. They hit Hogan so hard they actually cracked his ribs. Every time Hogan took a breath in the following weeks, you could see the pain on his face. This wasn't just wrestling storyline stuff. Those bruises were real, and everyone knew it. This brutal attack set the stage for something huge, the main event of WrestleMania 2 on April 7, 1986. But Hogan and Bundy weren't just going to have a regular match. No, they were going to be locked inside a steel cage. The build-up to this match was intense. Every time Bundy appeared on TV, he'd remind everyone how he'd injured Hogan's ribs, promising to finish the job inside the cage. Meanwhile, Hogan was selling those injured ribs, making fans wonder if their hero could possibly survive being trapped in a cage with this monster. When WrestleMania 2 finally arrived, the atmosphere was electric. Just imagine this scene. The massive steel cage lowering around the ring, Bundy's intimidating figure filling one corner, and Hogan, still favoring those injured ribs, pacing in the other. What followed was something wrestling fans still talk about today. Bundy used every inch of that cage, throwing Hogan into the steel, squashing him in corners, and coming incredibly close to winning the title several times. The fans were on their feet, holding their breath with every near fall. Could this be the night Hulkamania died? But just when it looked like Bundy might actually pull it off, Hogan found that supernatural strength he was famous for. Fighting through the pain of his injured ribs, he managed to hit his legendary leg drop, the move that had finished off countless opponents before. Even though Bundy didn't win the title that night, he did something just as important. He helped make WrestleMania feel like the biggest event in wrestling. This wasn't just another match. It was a war between giants that proved WrestleMania was truly wrestling's Super Bowl. After the huge cage match with Hogan, Bundy wasn't done making waves. He teamed back up with his old partner Big John Studd, and together they stumbled into one of the strangest and most fascinating feuds in wrestling history, the mystery of the Machines. Here's where things get really interesting. A group of massive wrestlers started showing up in masks, calling themselves the Machines. The leader was Giant Machine, and something about him seemed really familiar. Bobby the Brain. Heenan started putting the pieces together. He was convinced that Giant Machine was actually Andre the Giant in disguise. See, Andre had been suspended at the time, and Heenan believed this was his clever way of sneaking back into the WWF. Bundy and Studd became like wrestling detectives, trying to prove it was Andre under that mask. Every week, they'd try new ways to expose Giant Machine, measuring his footprints, comparing his moves to Andre's, even trying to rip the mask off during matches. This wasn't just about wrestling anymore. It was like a mystery show mixed with athletics. Fans packed arenas to see these wild six-man tag matches where Bundy, Studd, and Heenan would face different combinations of the Machines and their partners. The matches were full of drama and comedy, with Heenan constantly pointing out evidence that Giant Machine was Andre, while Bundy and Studd tried to unmask their mysterious opponents. But that's not all Bundy was up to during this time. He and Studd set their sights on the WWF Tag Team Champions, the British Bulldogs, Davey Boy Smith, and the Dynamite Kid. Now, this was really interesting because it showed a whole different side of Bundy. The Bulldogs were way smaller but incredibly quick and hard-hitting. Everyone wondered how a monster like Bundy would handle these speedy opponents. But he proved he could do more than just squash people. He adapted his style, showing he could keep up with the Bulldogs' faster pace. Sure, they never won the tag team titles, but these matches proved Bundy wasn't just a one-trick giant. He could work with anybody, big or small, and make the matches exciting. WrestleMania 3 showed fans a side of King Kong Bundy they never expected to see. Instead of battling giants, he found himself in one of the most unusual matches ever. a mixed six-person tag team match involving Little People wrestlers. Bundy teamed up with Little Tokyo and Lord Littlebrook against an odd team of Hillbilly Jim and his partners, the Hangaway. Finally, Bundy had enough. In a moment that made the massive crowd gasp, he grabbed Little Beaver, hoisted him up, and slammed him to the mat. Then came the crushing elbow drop, a move that looked absolutely devastating given the size difference. The referee and partners turned on him. This wasn't just another match. It showed that Bundy could tell a story in the ring and get fans emotionally invested. But 1987 wasn't done with King Kong Bundy yet. He entered the prestigious King of the Ring tournament, proving he had the stamina to wrestle multiple tough matches in a single night. This was a big deal, because most giants couldn't last through several matches like that. Bundy powered his way to the finals, where he faced the flashy and technical Macho Man, Randy Savage. Though Savage eventually won, Bundy showed everyone he could hang with the most skilled wrestlers in the business. Then came one of the biggest moments of late 1987. Bundy actually beat Hulk Hogan. Sure, it was by countout on Saturday night's Main Event 13, but beating Hogan in any way was a huge deal back then. Remember, this is when Hulkamania was at its peak. Even though Hogan got his revenge in the rematch on the next show, that victory proved Bundy was still one of the most dangerous men in wrestling. Anytime he stepped in the ring, fans knew there was a real chance they might see Hulkamania come crashing down. After dominating the WWF for years, Bundy surprised everyone by leaving in early 1988. He mostly stayed away from the big spotlight, showing up here and there in smaller wrestling shows. But you can't keep a monster down forever. In late 1994, wrestling fans' jaws dropped when King Kong Bundy made his return to the WWF. This time, he was part of Ted DiBiase's $1 Million Corporation, a group of wrestlers backed by the $1 Million Man's money. It was like seeing a legend come back to life. His comeback match couldn't have gone better. At the 1994 Survivor Series, Bundy teamed up with another monster, Bam Bam Bigelow. Together, they did something incredible. They were the only survivors in their elimination match against Lex Luger's team of American heroes. For a moment, it felt like the unstoppable Bundy of old was back. But wrestling had changed while Bundy was away. The 1995 Royal Rumble showed just how much. Everyone expected the returning giant to dominate the match. After all, how do you throw someone that big over the top rope? But then something shocking happened. Mabel, another massive wrestler who was on the rise, eliminated Bundy after just 3 minutes. The crowd couldn't believe it. This wasn't how the story was supposed to go for a legend like Bundy. His final WrestleMania moment came at WrestleMania 11, where he faced one of the most intimidating wrestlers ever, The Undertaker. Now, this wasn't quite the same as his legendary cage match with Hogan or his quick victory over SD Jones. But even though Bundy was older now, you could still see flashes of what made him so scary in the first place. When he trapped The Undertaker in the corner for his famous avalanche splash, longtime fans got goosebumps, remembering the monster who had terrorized the WWF in the 1980s. While he didn't win the match, he showed that even in the twilight of his career, King Kong Bundy could still make fans hold their breath whenever he stepped in the ring. After hanging up his wrestling boots, Chris Pallies had to deal with something much tougher than any opponent he'd faced in the ring: the long-term effects of his wrestling career. Like many wrestlers who gave their bodies to entertain fans night after night, Pallies was worried about brain injuries that could affect the rest of his life. He wasn't alone in this fight. Along with other wrestlers, he joined a big lawsuit against WWE, claiming the company hadn't done enough to protect wrestlers from serious head injuries. The lawsuit brought up some heavy issues. It said WWE knew about the dangers of repeated head impacts, but didn't do enough to protect their wrestlers. According to the legal papers, the company didn't just fail to provide proper medical care, they actually tried to hide how serious these injuries could be. This wasn't just about money. It was about wrestling's dark side and the price athletes pay for entertaining fans. Things got complicated when the lawsuit was thrown out by the courts in September 2018. But the effects of this legal battle went beyond the courtroom. Wrestling journalist Anthony Mango from Bleacher Report pointed out something interesting. He believed this lawsuit might be why Pallies never made it into the WWE Hall of Fame. Despite being one of the most memorable big men in wrestling history and helping make WrestleMania the huge event it is today, King Kong Bundy's name was never called for the Hall of Fame. King Kong Bundy wasn't just a monster in the ring. He had a whole other life in the entertainment world. Here's something cool that not everyone knows. The main family in the hit TV show Married with Children wasn't named Bundy by accident. The show's creators were such big wrestling fans that they named the family after King Kong Bundy himself. He even showed up on the show several times, and fans went crazy every time he appeared. But that wasn't his only brush with Hollywood. In the movie Moving, he got to work with comedy legend Richard Pryor. Picture this: the massive King Kong Bundy playing a clumsy mover. It was like seeing your favorite wrestling monster in a whole new light. Then there was Weird Science, where he got to play a wrestling coach. Talk about perfect casting. Who better to teach TV characters about wrestling than a real-life wrestling legend? Later in life, Bundy surprised everyone by stepping onto comedy club stages. That's right. The same guy who demanded 5 counts and crushed opponents in steel cages was now making people laugh on purpose. He traded body slams for punchlines, proving he had a quick wit to match his impressive size. But on March 4, 2019, the wrestling world lost a true giant. Chris Pallies, known to millions as King Kong Bundy, passed away at his home in Glassboro, New Jersey. He was just 63 years old, taken too soon by complications from diabetes. The same town where his incredible journey began now said goodbye to one of wrestling's most unforgettable characters. When we look back at King Kong Bundy's amazing career, we see so much more than just another big guy in wrestling. Before him, most giant wrestlers would just lumber around the ring, using their size and nothing else. Bundy changed all that. Here was a huge man who could move like someone half his size, who could tell stories in the ring, who could make you laugh on TV one day and terrify you in a steel cage the next. Bundy's biggest gift to wrestling was showing future big men what was possible. He showed up in main events at the first 2 WrestleManias, helping make those shows the huge deal they are today. He broke Andre the Giant's sternum, went toe-to-toe with Hulk Hogan in a steel cage, and even made people take little people matches seriously at WrestleMania 3. He could work with anybody, any style, any size, and make it look good. After him, you had to have personality. You had to be able to work with different kinds of opponents. Whenever you see a modern giant wrestler moving quickly or cutting a funny promo, you're seeing a little bit of Bundy's influence. Today's wrestling fans might see clips of King Kong Bundy and think of him as a star from wrestling's past. But for those who saw him in his prime, who felt the arena shake when he hit that corner splash, who counted along as referees got to 5, we know we were watching something special. The walking condominium may be gone, but the blueprint he created for future wrestling giants will stand forever. Rest in peace, King Kong Bundy. And thank you for making us count to 5. If you think King Kong Bundy's career nosedive was shocking, then you're not ready for how WWE destroyed one of their greatest super heavyweight wrestlers of all time. Next up, Big Van Vader. Big Van Vader was one of wrestling's most agile big men, whose moonsaults and devastating power moves made him a superstar in both Japan and America. He went from being an NFL lineman to becoming a 3-time WCW World Champion and the most feared gaijin in Japanese wrestling history. After decades of punishing his 400-pound frame with high-flying moves, Vader's body began to break down. In 2016, doctors delivered Vader a death sentence. He had just 2 years to live. The year was 1987, and professional wrestling was undergoing a seismic shift. What once was a business dominated by technically gifted performers who could go an hour in the ring was rapidly transforming into something bigger, literally. Promoters had discovered a simple truth: size sold tickets. The template for success had a name: Hulk Hogan. At 6'7" with his famous 24-inch pythons, Hogan proved that impressive physicality combined with charisma could draw unprecedented crowds. Every promoter wanted their own Hulk Hogan, but genuine superstars were rare. Promoters began recruiting athletes with proven backgrounds: football players, weightlifters, martial artists. Yet most struggled with wrestling's unique demands. What wrestling needed was unprecedented: a super heavyweight with cruiserweight agility. Someone who could throw opponents across the ring one moment and fly through the air the next. Enter Leon White, a 6'5", 450-pound former NFL lineman whose journey to becoming wrestling's most feared monster began with a devastating career-ending injury. What transforms a broken football player into the embodiment of destruction in the squared circle? For White, this unexpected transformation would take him from the bright lights of the Super Bowl to the smoke-filled arenas of Japan, creating a legacy no one could have predicted. Before he was breaking backs and powerbombing opponents through tables, Leon White was dominating on the football field at the University of Colorado. His exceptional play as an offensive lineman earned him second-team All-American honors, catching the attention of NFL scouts who saw immense potential in his combination of size and athleticism. That potential turned into reality when the Los Angeles Rams selected White in the third round of the 1978 NFL Draft. White's football career seemed to be on the perfect trajectory. By his second season, he had helped the Rams reach the biggest stage in American sports, Super Bowl 14. Though the Rams ultimately fell to the Pittsburgh Steelers, White had achieved what most NFL players only dream of. His future in professional football looked bright, until fate cruelly intervened. During training camp following that Super Bowl appearance, White suffered a devastating knee injury that would ultimately end his NFL career. In an instant, everything he had worked toward was gone. The rehabilitation was grueling, and the prognosis was clear. His knee would never hold up to the demands of professional football again. What now? It's the question that haunts every athlete whose career ends prematurely. White found himself at a crossroads familiar to many former professional athletes. Still young, physically gifted, but stripped of the identity that had defined him since college. The transition from celebrated athlete to regular civilian can be crushing, and many struggle to find purpose after the roar of the crowd fades away. For 2 years, White searched for a new direction. Then, in 1985, a fortuitous connection changed everything. Brad Rheingans, a former Olympic wrestler turned wrestling trainer, saw something special in White. Where others saw a washed-up football player, Rheingans recognized a rare combination of natural athleticism and imposing size that could translate perfectly to the squared circle. Under Rheingans' guidance, White began the difficult process of learning an entirely new physical craft. The footwork, the body control, the psychology of professional wrestling. It was all foreign territory. But White attacked his training with the same dedication that had once made him an All-American, determined to prove he could excel in this new arena. By December 1985, just months after beginning his training, White made his professional debut for the American Wrestling Association. His initial ring name reflected his football background, Baby Bull. The moniker would later evolve to Bull Power, but the connection to his gridiron past remained clear. Promoters hoped that White's football credentials would give him instant credibility with wrestling audiences. But something wasn't clicking. Despite his imposing presence and growing in-ring skills, White struggled to find his identity in American wrestling. The Bull Power character lacked the distinctiveness needed to stand out in the crowded landscape of 1980s wrestling. He was big, he was strong, but American audiences hadn't yet seen what made him special. Wrestling fans had seen football players try to transition to the ring before, and many had failed to make a lasting impression. White needed something more, a character, a presence, a style that would separate him from every other big man in the business. But that transformation wouldn't happen on American soil. It would require a journey thousands of miles from home. In 1987, White joined a wrestling tour heading to Germany, where he competed for Otto Wanz's Catch Wrestling Association. For many wrestlers, these international tours were simply a way to make extra money and gain experience. For White, it would be the doorway to destiny. During those German shows, White's raw power combined with his surprising agility for a man of his size caught the attention of someone who would change the course of his career forever. Riki Choshu, a booker for New Japan Pro Wrestling, witnessed White's performances and immediately recognized the potential that American promoters had somehow missed. What Choshu saw wasn't just another big man. He saw a legitimate athlete who moved with uncanny quickness despite his massive frame. He saw a performer who could bring authenticity and danger to the Japanese rings. He saw the monster that wrestling had been waiting for. Choshu approached White with an opportunity that would transform him from a struggling ex-football player into one of the most feared wrestlers on the planet. New Japan Pro Wrestling wanted him, not as bull power, but as something entirely new. Something terrifying. Something Japanese audiences had never seen before. For White, this invitation represented more than just another booking. It was a chance to reinvent himself completely. A chance to leave behind the shadow of his football career and forge a new legacy in a land where his size and strength would be weaponized in ways American promoters had never imagined. As White boarded the plane to Japan, he couldn't have known that the character waiting for him would become one of the most iconic in wrestling history. He couldn't have known that the helmet, the mask, and the name they had prepared for him would strike fear into the hearts of wrestlers and fans alike for decades to come. The flight to Japan was no ordinary journey for Leon White. What awaited him wasn't just another wrestling gig, it was a complete transformation that would redefine what a monster heel could be. Japan saw something in the massive American that US promoters couldn't fully envision. A physically imposing force capable of becoming an object of genuine terror, not just another big man going through the motions. When White stepped off that plane in December 1987, he wasn't yet Big Van Vader. The character New Japan Pro Wrestling had in mind would push boundaries in ways the American wrestling scene hadn't dared. Japanese promoters understood that creating a truly fearsome villain required more than just size. It demanded presence, mystique, and the kind of legitimacy that only came from authentic physical dominance. The transformation began with the mask. Not just any mask, but an intimidating black face covering that obscured White's features while emphasizing his massive frame. Then came the crowning touch, the smoking helmet. This wasn't merely a costume piece, it was psychological warfare. As White made his entrance, the helmet would shoot smoke into the arena, creating an otherworldly effect that made fans genuinely uncomfortable. This wasn't your typical wrestling entrance, this was the arrival of something monstrous. The character itself drew inspiration from Japanese folk traditions, giving it cultural resonance that American audiences might not fully appreciate. For Japanese fans, this wasn't just another foreigner coming to their shores. This was a manifestation of something primal and threatening, crafted specifically to provoke visceral reactions. The name itself, Big Van Vader, carried a weight and menace that bull power never could. But the true genius of Vader's Japanese transformation went beyond aesthetics. It was in how perfectly the character aligned with Japan's distinctive wrestling philosophy. Where American wrestling often prioritized theatrical storylines and larger-than-life personalities, Japanese puroresu demanded something more fundamental: believable fighting spirit and legitimate physical confrontation. In the Big Van Vader character, White found the perfect vehicle to embrace this philosophy. Every strike looked and felt devastatingly real. His style didn't just simulate combat, it existed in that razor-thin space between performance and actual fighting. When Vader hit someone, they stayed hit. When he suplexed an opponent, the impact reverberated through the building. The line between Leon White the performer and Vader the destroyer became increasingly blurred. What made him truly revolutionary wasn't just his willingness to hit hard, it was his shocking mobility for a man his size. Most 450-pound wrestlers moved like they were wading through quicksand. But Vader could move with the explosive power of a much smaller man. His signature Vader bomb, climbing to the second rope and launching his massive frame onto a prone opponent, showcased an athleticism that defied physical logic. Japanese fans, with their sophisticated understanding of wrestling as physical art, immediately recognized something special in this gaijin monster. Here was a foreigner who not only respected their wrestling traditions but elevated them through his unique combination of size, power, and athletic ability. He didn't just adapt to the Japanese style, he transformed it through sheer physical dominance. This marriage of character and capability produced moments that transcended typical wrestling fare. On April 24, 1989, Vader achieved something previously unthinkable when he defeated Shinya Hashimoto to become the IWGP Heavyweight Champion, the first foreign wrestler ever to hold Japan's most prestigious title. In a wrestling culture where national pride and fighting honor were central themes, allowing a gaijin to capture their crown was the ultimate acknowledgement of Vader's extraordinary impact. This wasn't just a booking decision. It was a cultural milestone that broke long-standing barriers in Japanese wrestling. For promoters to entrust their championship to a foreigner spoke volumes about Vader's exceptional ability to connect with Japanese audiences through his physical intensity rather than promos or character work. He communicated through the universal language of legitimate toughness. What made Vader's achievement even more remarkable was how he earned Japanese fans' respect despite being positioned as their ultimate adversary. They didn't cheer for him, they feared him. But that fear came with profound respect. His matches became must-see events precisely because they blurred the line between scripted entertainment and genuine physical confrontation. When Vader stepped through the ropes, the stakes felt higher, the danger more palpable. His hard-hitting approach perfectly aligned with Japanese wrestling's emphasis on strong style, a philosophy that valued realistic striking and submission work over theatrical flourishes. Vader didn't just participate in this tradition, he became one of its most feared practitioners. His forearm strikes weren't just for show, they contained enough force to legitimately stagger opponents. His power moves weren't just visually impressive, they carried genuine impact that sometimes resulted in real injuries. Yet what truly separated Vader from other Gaijin monsters who had come before him was his willingness to absorb punishment as readily as he dished it out. Japanese wrestling culture valued fighting spirit above all else, the ability to endure hardship and still push forward. Vader embodied this quality not through dramatic selling, but through his authentic toughness. When struck with a stiff kick or punch, he didn't crumple dramatically. He absorbed the blow and came back with something even more devastating. This combination of believable offense and credible defense made Vader uniquely captivating to Japanese audiences. They recognized in him something rare, a foreign villain who understood and respected their wrestling traditions enough to fully embody them. He wasn't playing a character who could absorb punishment. He was demonstrating authentic toughness that couldn't be faked. As his reputation grew throughout Japan, Vader became more than just another foreign heel passing through. He became a measuring stick, the ultimate test for any Japanese wrestler looking to prove their own fighting spirit. To stand toe-to-toe with Vader and survive was to demonstrate legitimate toughness. To defeat him was to achieve wrestling immortality. What began as a simple character transformation had evolved into something far more significant. Vader had become a revolutionary figure in Japanese wrestling, combining elements that had previously seemed incompatible. He offered the intimidating size that American promotions valued, along with the legitimate physicality that Japanese audiences demanded. He could deliver both spectacular power moves and believable striking exchanges. He could be both a monster heel and a respected fighting champion. This perfect synthesis of traits made Vader not just successful but truly transformative within Japanese wrestling. He didn't just fill a role, he expanded the possibilities of what a Gaijin monster could be. Before Vader, foreign heavyweights in Japan were often one-dimensional attractions. After him, they had a new standard to live up to, one that required not just size but athletic ability, not just presence but legitimate physical credibility. Vader's character revolutionized what a Gaijin monster could be, but the man behind the mask possessed something even rarer, a pain threshold that defied human limits. Most wrestlers build reputations on carefully crafted personas, but Leon White's legend was forged in moments of genuine, jaw-dropping toughness that blurred the line between character and reality. April 24, 1990, at the Sumo Hall in Tokyo. What should have been just another championship defense for Vader against Stan Hansen instead became the night that cemented his superhuman reputation forever. During an exchange of stiff shots, standard for a Japanese strong-style match, Hansen's thumb caught Vader directly in the eye. This wasn't a worked spot or planned moment. The impact was so severe that Vader's eyeball was literally forced out of its socket, hanging against his cheek. For any normal human being, this would mean immediate medical attention. The match would stop. The injury would likely end a career. But Vader wasn't a normal human being. As officials rushed to check on him, Vader did something that still shocks wrestling historians to this day. He reached up, physically pushed his displaced eyeball back into its socket with his own fingers, and demanded the match continue. Let that sink in for a moment. With his eyeball dangling from the socket, Vader's first instinct wasn't to seek medical help. It was to manually reinsert it and keep fighting. The Japanese crowd, already accustomed to incredible displays of fighting spirit, watched in stunned silence as this American monster refused to acknowledge what should have been a catastrophic injury. This wasn't the carefully choreographed violence that defines professional wrestling. This was a moment of legitimate, horrifying trauma that Vader simply decided to work through. And work through it he did, finishing the match despite sustaining an injury that would send most people into shock. What makes this story even more remarkable is that it wasn't an isolated incident. Throughout his career, Vader displayed an almost incomprehensible tolerance for pain that went far beyond professional toughness into something almost mythological. He routinely worked through broken ribs, wrestling full matches while struggling to breathe. He shrugged off hand injuries that would have sidelined other performers for months. Concussions, which are now treated with extreme caution, were just another day at the office for the man behind the mask. This supernatural ability to absorb punishment earned Vader a unique form of respect among his peers, though often from a distance. Many wrestlers who faced him speak of both admiration and hesitation. They respected his legitimacy and commitment to physical intensity, but that same quality made many hesitant to work with him. Being in the ring with Vader meant accepting a simple truth. You were going to get hit, and hit hard. Working with Vader was like being in a car accident that lasted 15 minutes, one former opponent recalled. His forearm shots weren't the theatrical strikes common in American wrestling. They were delivered with thunderous force that could legitimately daze his opponents. In an industry built on the illusion of combat, Vader brought something dangerously close to the real thing. What made Vader truly extraordinary, however, wasn't just his capacity to endure pain. It was how he combined that toughness with unexpected athletic ability. The physics seemed impossible. How could a man weighing over 450 pounds move with such agility? Yet there he was, ascending to the second rope and launching into moonsaults, backward somersaults that smaller cruiserweights struggled to execute properly. Imagine the sight. A man the size of a small refrigerator flying through the air with the grace of someone half his size before crashing down with devastating impact. It wasn't just impressive, it was revolutionary. Before Vader, big men were expected to be plodding powerhouses who relied on size alone. He shattered that template completely, executing drop kicks, leaping clotheslines, and even top rope maneuvers that defied every convention about what super heavyweights could do. This combination created something wrestling had never seen before. A performer with legitimate monster size and power, who could also work at a pace and athletic level previously reserved for much smaller competitors. He wasn't just big, he was explosively agile. He wasn't just tough, he was legitimately dangerous. He wasn't just intimidating, he was technically proficient. Japanese fans recognized this rare combination immediately, embracing Vader as a unique force of nature whose matches delivered something they couldn't see anywhere else. His bouts became must-see spectacles where the impossible seemed routine. Could he really drop-kick an opponent at that size? Could he really absorb that much punishment without flinching? The answer was always yes, defying expectations with every performance. While his character work was compelling, the smoking helmet, the intimidating mask, the fearsome presence, it was this foundation of legitimate physical anomaly that gave Vader's persona its undeniable authenticity. He wasn't playing a monster. In many ways, he was one. The lines between Leon White, the performer, and Vader, the character, blurred into something wholly unique in wrestling history. This authenticity translated into an aura that few wrestlers have ever achieved. When Vader entered an arena, the atmosphere changed. This wasn't just another big man playing tough. This was someone who had proven, in the most graphic ways possible, that his toughness was horrifyingly real. That eyeball incident wasn't just a story told by wrestling fans. It was documented reality, captured on film for anyone brave enough to watch. As news of Vader's Japanese exploits began filtering back to American wrestling fans through tape trading and wrestling publications, anticipation built about what might happen when this force of nature eventually returned to American shores. How would audiences accustomed to the more theatrical presentation of American wrestling respond to someone whose approach was so legitimately physical? What would happen when Vader's uncompromising style collided with American expectations? The whispers about Vader's Japanese dominance had reached American shores, but WCW fans were about to experience something far more terrifying than rumors. When a 450-pound mastodon, who could legitimately end careers, stepped into an American ring. On January 19, 1990, the entire wrestling landscape was forced to change around one unstoppable man. WCW executives knew exactly what they had acquired: a monster with credibility. But even monsters need direction, which is why they paired Vader with the legendary Harley Race as his manager. This wasn't just smart booking, it was strategic brilliance. Race, a former 8-time NWA World Champion, lent instant legitimacy to the masked behemoth. When Race spoke about Vader's destructive capabilities, fans believed him because Race himself was known as one of the toughest men in wrestling history. American audiences had never seen anything quite like Vader before. While the theatrical American style of the era focused on larger-than-life characters who mostly protected each other in the ring, Vader brought something entirely different: an uncompromising physical intensity that made viewers uncomfortable. His matches weren't just performances, they looked like genuine assaults. Each thunderous blow echoed through arenas, making fans wince and wrestlers in the back reconsider their career choices. Vader's reputation as a stiff worker who laid in his moves with full force added to his mystique, noted one wrestling historian who followed his career closely. This wasn't kayfabe or an act. Opponents genuinely feared working with him because the pain would be real. The fear Vader generated reached new heights during a match where he broke Joe Thurman's back with a powerbomb. This wasn't a storyline injury or an exaggeration. The impact of Vader's move caused legitimate, career-altering damage. Word spread quickly through the locker room. Be careful with Vader or pay the consequences. Suddenly, when Vader stood across the ring from an opponent, the tension in the arena was palpable. Fans weren't just watching a match, they were witnessing someone fighting for survival. UCW found the perfect showcase for their new monster in Sting, the company's most popular babyface. Their feud became an instant classic built on a simple but compelling dynamic: the colorful, athletic hero against the unstoppable force of nature. Their confrontations felt like watching David versus Goliath, except Goliath moved with shocking speed and agility. When Sting would finally connect with his signature Stinger Splash, arenas would erupt, not just because it was an exciting move, but because anyone willing to deliberately collide with Vader seemed to be tempting fate itself. The company quickly realized Vader's value as their premier monster heel. While most big men were slowly escorted up the card over months or years, Vader smashed through the hierarchy with the same force he used to demolish opponents. His rise was meteoric by wrestling standards, culminating in winning the WCW World Heavyweight Championship from Ric Flair, the standard-bearer for American wrestling excellence. This wasn't just any title change. For Vader to defeat Flair, the most respected technical wrestler of his generation, sent a powerful message. Technique and experience couldn't overcome this force of nature. Over his WCW tenure, Vader would become a 3-time world champion, each reign establishing him further as the company's most dominant figure. What made Vader truly special was how his presence transformed the entire roster. Every babyface in WCW now had to be measured by one question: could they credibly stand up to Vader? Those who couldn't were relegated to mid-card status, while those who stepped up to the challenge were elevated through their willingness to face the monster. WCW literally restructured their hero hierarchy based on who might believably survive in the ring with him. Fan reactions to Vader were unlike those for any other heel. When most villains appeared, crowds would boo and jeer, standard responses to wrestling bad guys. But when Vader's music hit, a different energy filled the arena. There was fear, genuine concern for his opponents, and a distinct uneasiness that something truly dangerous might happen. This wasn't just another wrestling match. It was a potential catastrophe unfolding before their eyes. Vader's dominance created a unique problem for WCW bookers. How do you create suspense when your monster seems unbeatable? The solution came through psychological storytelling that focused on the courage of his opponents rather than their physical chances. When Sting, Dustin Rhodes, or Davey Boy Smith stood across from Vader, the story wasn't about whether they could overpower him, but whether their heart and determination could somehow find a way to survive and possibly triumph. Television audiences grew as Vader's reputation spread. Casual viewers who had drifted away from wrestling returned to witness this phenomenon for themselves. Was there really a 450-pound man who could perform moonsaults? Could someone that large move with such devastating speed? The curiosity factor alone drove ratings, but it was the legitimate aura of danger surrounding Vader's matches that kept viewers coming back. Behind the scenes, Vader's presence created a fascinating dynamic. While many wrestlers feared working with him, others specifically requested matches, seeing a program with Vader as career-defining. If you could survive, or better yet, look competitive against him, your stock in the industry immediately rose. Few accolades meant more in early 1990s WCW than hearing locker room veterans say, "He stood toe-to-toe with Vader." WCW's creative team quickly discovered another benefit to having Vader on the roster. He made wrestling feel real again. In an era when fans were becoming increasingly aware of wrestling's predetermined nature, Vader's matches had a believability that others lacked. When he hit someone, it looked and sounded like it hurt because it genuinely did. This authentic quality became WCW's competitive advantage during a difficult period for the industry. As Vader's reputation for physical brutality grew, so did the anticipation for what would happen when someone decided to fight fire with fire. The wrestling world didn't have to wait long. A particular opponent was emerging, someone with a legendary pain threshold and willingness to suffer that matched even Vader's capacity to inflict damage. This wasn't just another challenger. This was someone who would purposely seek out punishment that would make normal wrestlers quit the business entirely. Enter Cactus Jack, a man who didn't just survive pain, he craved it. While most wrestlers prayed to escape Vader's brutality, Foley had a different strategy: demand more punishment than even the monster was comfortable delivering. Their collision in WCW wasn't just a feud, it was legitimate combat disguised as entertainment that would permanently change wrestling's landscape. When Mick Foley first stepped into the ring against Vader in WCW, nobody could have predicted what would follow. Foley, wrestling under his deranged Cactus Jack persona, wasn't interested in technical wrestling displays. He wanted violence, and in Vader, he found the perfect dance partner. Their initial encounters immediately stood out for their unrelenting physicality, creating a stark contrast with what audiences had grown accustomed to seeing on American television. As their rivalry intensified, so did the violence. Their matches became showcases of punishment that blurred the line between scripted entertainment and actual combat. While most feuds of that era featured carefully choreographed sequences, Vader and Foley seemed determined to one-up each other with each brutal encounter. Body slams on concrete, steel chair shots, and devastating power moves became standard fare in their battles. The infamous Lost in Cleveland storyline demonstrated just how far WCW was willing to push the envelope with this feud. After a particularly savage beating at Vader's hands, storylines portrayed Foley as suffering such severe trauma that he developed amnesia, wandering the streets of Cleveland with no memory of who he was. This wasn't just another wrestling angle, it was psychological horror dressed as sports entertainment, elevating their rivalry beyond simple physical confrontation into something more disturbing and compelling. Their Texas death match raised the bar for extreme wrestling in America. This wasn't the sanitized violence typical of early 90s wrestling. It was a gruesome spectacle that had viewers genuinely concerned for the participants' well-being. The match structure, which allowed for continuous punishment until one man couldn't answer a 10 count, was perfectly suited for showcasing both Vader's destructive power and Foley's unnatural ability to absorb punishment. But nothing in their American encounters compared to what happened in Munich, Germany, in March 1993. During their match, Vader executed a powerbomb on Foley, but not onto the protected ring canvas, onto the exposed concrete floor. The impact was catastrophic. In the chaos that followed, a moment that changed everything for me in wrestling. Despite suffering an injury that would send most people rushing to the hospital, Foley insisted on finishing the match. This wasn't just toughness. It was a level of dedication to performance art that defied rational explanation. What made the Vader-Foley feuds so revolutionary wasn't just its violence, but how that violence was used to tell a compelling story. Each match built upon the previous encounter, escalating the stakes and intensity. This wasn't mindless brutality, it was physical storytelling at its most visceral. Vader portrayed the unstoppable force, while Foley's willingness to endure increasingly horrific punishment made him the ultimate immovable object. The impact of their feud extended far beyond their own careers. As footage of their matches circulated among wrestling fans, a new generation of performers took note. The physical intensity they displayed would eventually influence the development of hardcore wrestling styles that would dominate the late 1990s, particularly in ECW and later WWE's Attitude Era. The Vader-Foley blueprint, combining legitimate physical impact with compelling character work, became a template for creating memorable wrestling feuds. For Vader, the feud cemented his reputation as wrestling's most dangerous opponent. If this monster could inflict this level of damage on someone as willing as Foley, what could he do to those who weren't prepared to sacrifice their bodies? The mystique around Vader grew exponentially, making him an even more valuable commodity in the wrestling business. For Foley, the feud was transformative in different ways. Before facing Vader, he was viewed as a brawler with limited appeal. After surviving wrestling's most destructive force, Foley earned a level of respect that would follow him throughout his career. His willingness to endure Vader's brutality established the hardcore legend persona that would eventually make him a main event star and WWE champion years later. Industry figures have frequently cited this program as one of wrestling's most influential. Wrestling historian and journalist Dave Meltzer has called their matches revolutionary in American wrestling, noting how they changed audience expectations for physical storytelling. Fellow wrestlers have studied these matches as masterclasses in how to make violence meaningful rather than gratuitous. The cultural impact of the Vader-Foley feud extends beyond just wrestling history. Their battles represented a significant shift in what American television audiences would accept in terms of violence and physical storytelling. While previous wrestling feuds maintained a certain cartoonish quality, Vader and Foley brought a realism that was both uncomfortable and compelling. When blood appeared on screen, viewers knew it wasn't the product of hidden razor blades. It was the result of legitimate impact. What's perhaps most remarkable about their rivalry is how it elevated both men despite its brutality. This wasn't a case of one wrestler being sacrificed to make another look strong. Through their willingness to push physical boundaries, both Vader and Foley emerged as bigger stars than before they met. Their matches didn't just entertain, they told the story of two men willing to sacrifice their bodies for their art in ways that resonated deeply with audiences. With his reputation as wrestling's most feared monster firmly established, Vader finally arrived in the WWF at the 1996 Royal Rumble. The moment was electric. Here was the Destroyer, who had terrorized 3 continents, entering the biggest wrestling company in the world. Fans who knew his work in Japan and WCW held their breath as Vader stormed the ring from the number 13 position, quickly eliminating 4 competitors before Shawn Michaels eventually tossed him out. The message seemed clear. Vader was going to be an unstoppable force in the WWF. The initial plans for Vader couldn't have been more promising. Vince McMahon positioned him as the ultimate monster heel, managed by Jim Cornette and flanked by other villains like Owen Hart and the British Bulldog in a stable called Camp Cornette. The blueprint had been drawn. Vader would steamroll through the roster before eventually challenging for the championship. And not just any championship program, he was slated to face the company's golden boy, Shawn Michaels. The original booking plans revealed something even more shocking. Vader wasn't just supposed to face Michaels at SummerSlam 1996. He was actually scheduled to win the WWF Championship. This was almost unheard of for a newcomer, especially one with Vader's physically imposing style. It spoke volumes about how much potential McMahon saw in the character. For a brief moment, it seemed Vader would reach even greater heights than his WCW and Japanese runs. But then came SummerSlam, 1996, and the infamous moment that many wrestling historians point to as the beginning of Vader's WWF downfall. During their championship match, a miscommunication occurred, and Michaels, known for his backstage political power and mercurial temperament, broke character and openly yelled at Vader in the middle of the match. The monster who had terrorized wrestling's biggest stars was being dressed down on live pay-per-view. What fans didn't know was that the problems ran much deeper than one awkward in-ring moment. Behind the scenes, Shawn Michaels had apparently voiced complaints about Vader's personal hygiene, claiming the big man hadn't washed his ring gear. It seems almost absurd. The feared monster who had popped his own eyeball back into its socket was being undone by locker room politics and petty complaints. The consequences came swiftly. The planned championship program with Vader was scrapped entirely, and Psycho Sid was inserted as Michaels' next challenger instead. Just like that, Vader went from being the company's next top heel to just another name on the roster. The pattern that would define his WWF run had been established. Big introduction, promising start, then inexplicable scaling back. Vader did get some high-profile programs after the Michaels situation, most notably a feud with The Undertaker. Their match at Canadian Stampede showcased Vader's ability to work with larger opponents, proving he could still deliver the quality performances when given the opportunity. But these matches, despite being well-received, never led to Vader reclaiming the top monster position that seemed guaranteed when he first arrived. Instead, Vader's character began suffering the death of 1,000 cuts. Vince McMahon, notorious for wanting to put his own stamp on established wrestlers, reportedly pushed to rename Vader as the Mastodon. It was a baffling suggestion. Vader was already one of the most established character names in wrestling, with recognition across multiple continents. Though Vader successfully resisted this particular change, it symbolized the fundamental misunderstanding of what made him special. The most telling sign of Vader's diminished status came in his later feuds. The man who had headlined major shows against Sting, Ric Flair, and the Great Muta was now wrestling mid-card programs with Goldust and Mark Henry. These weren't bad matches, but they represented a stark contrast to his monster status elsewhere. The most physically intimidating performer in wrestling had somehow become just another heel scrambling for television time. By 1998, the frustration had clearly boiled over. The man who had been promised championship glory was now lost in the shuffle, with no clear creative direction. For a performer who had been positioned as an unstoppable force in every previous company, this treatment was simply unacceptable. When Vader finally asked for his release from the WWF in 1998, it marked the end of what should have been his crowning achievement, a run with wrestling's largest company that would cement his legacy. What makes Vader's WWF tenure so fascinating isn't just that it failed to meet expectations, but rather how it failed. This wasn't a case of a wrestler not connecting with the audience or delivering poor performances. Vader was still capable of the same physically intense matches that had made him famous. The crowd still reacted to him as a credible monster. The disconnect existed entirely in how the company positioned him compared to what made him successful elsewhere. In many ways, Vader was a victim of the WWF's tendency to reshape performers in their own image. The complexity and authenticity that made Vader special in Japan and WCW, the legitimately scary intensity, the shocking athleticism for his size, the uncompromising physicality, were all watered down in favor of a more standardized WWF heel presentation. They had taken a unique talent and tried to make him just another big man. The bitter irony is that Vader's time in the WWF coincided with the company's shift toward a more adult-oriented, physically intense product that would become the Attitude Era. The real Vader, the uncompromising, legitimately frightening force who had terrorized Japan and WCW, would have been perfect for this new direction. Instead, by the time the WWF fully embraced this edgier approach, Vader was already on his way out the door. The WWF may have squandered Vader's potential, but his career was far from over. In a fascinating twist of fate, the same uncompromising style that got him in trouble in America would make him the subject of underground wrestling worship in the internet age, turning a failed run into merely one chapter of a legendary career. When Vader walked out of the WWF in 1998, he wasn't retreating in defeat. He was returning to the place where he'd always been royalty. Japan welcomed the mastodon back with open arms, treating him like the conquering hero American promoters had failed to recognize. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. While Vince McMahon had relegated him to mid-card status fighting guys like Goldust, Japanese promotions immediately restored him to main event prominence. The reaction from Japanese fans told the whole story. These weren't audiences politely applauding a former star. These were the same passionate crowds who remembered the man who once caused riots after defeating Antonio Inoki. They hadn't forgotten the monster who terrorized their heroes. In Japan, Vader wasn't just another big guy. He was professional wrestling's ultimate final boss. This period of Vader's career revealed just how dramatically Japanese and American wrestling philosophies had diverged. In the WWF, backstage politics and creative disagreements had steadily eroded his standing. Meanwhile, All Japan Pro Wrestling embraced everything that made Vader special: his legitimately stiff strikes, his surprising agility, and his uncompromising approach to physicality. They didn't try to water down his character or rebrand him with ridiculous new names. They simply let Vader be Vader. Throughout the early 2000s, Vader continued delivering the goods in high-profile matches across major Japanese promotions. When Pro Wrestling Noah emerged as a powerhouse, Vader joined their roster and maintained his status as one of wrestling's most intimidating figures. While American fans were being fed a steady diet of WWE's increasingly cartoonish presentation, Japanese audiences were witnessing the authentic Vader experience: bone-crushing strikes, devastating power moves, and that same surprising athleticism that defied his massive frame. What's most remarkable about this period is how Vader maintained his credibility well into his 40s and beyond. Most super heavyweights see their capabilities drastically diminish with age. Their already limited mobility further decreases, their wind gets shorter, and their matches become increasingly difficult to watch. But Vader continued performing at a high level, delivering the hard-hitting matches fans expected even as his body absorbed punishment that would have ended most careers years earlier. The irony of Vader's renaissance wasn't lost on American wrestling insiders. Here was a performer the biggest American promotion had essentially discarded, continuing to draw money and create compelling matches overseas. Every thunderous chop and explosive powerbomb in a Japanese ring was a reminder of what American audiences were missing. Vader did make occasional returns to American wrestling, including appearances in TNA, Impact Wrestling. These brief runs served to reintroduce him to younger American fans who might have missed his prime years. While these appearances didn't reach the heights of his Japanese work during this period, they kept his name in circulation within American wrestling circles. In 2012, WWE brought Vader back for a memorable confrontation with Heath Slater during a Legends program. For longtime fans, it was a bittersweet moment, a glimpse of the monster they remembered, but also a stark reminder of how poorly he'd been utilized during his full-time run with the company. When Vader's music hit and he stormed to the ring, the audience reaction made it clear. They hadn't forgotten what made him special, even if WWE's creative team had failed to capitalize on it years earlier. Perhaps the most unexpected development in Vader's later career was his emergence as a cult hero among internet wrestling fans in the 2000s. As high-speed internet became commonplace, footage of Vader's legendary Japanese matches began circulating among hardcore wrestling enthusiasts. Young fans who had only seen his watered-down WWF run were suddenly discovering the real Vader, the unstoppable force who had revolutionized what a super heavyweight could do in the ring. Online wrestling forums buzzed with discussions of his most brutal matches. Clips of his moonsaults and devastating power moves circulated on early video-sharing platforms. Wrestling journalists and historians began re-evaluating his place in the pantheon of all-time greats. In the digital age, Vader's legend grew beyond what it had been during his active career, as fans could now access his entire body of work, free from the limitations of what American television had been willing to show. This digital rediscovery coincided with a new generation of wrestlers who clearly showed Vader's influence. Suddenly, the wrestling world was seeing big men who could move like cruiserweights, who weren't afraid to leave their feet, who combined intimidating size with surprising athleticism. The DNA of Vader's revolutionary approach was evident in performers who had studied his matches on VHS tapes and internet clips. When you watch modern super heavyweights execute top rope maneuvers or display agility that defies their size, you're seeing Vader's legacy in action. He didn't just change what was possible for wrestlers of his era. He permanently altered expectations for what big men in wrestling could accomplish. The moonsault, once considered a move exclusively for lighter performers, became a possibility for larger wrestlers because Vader had shattered that ceiling decades earlier. What makes Vader's later career so fascinating is how it ultimately secured his legacy despite the mishandling he experienced in the WWF. Had his career ended after his disappointing American run, he might have been remembered as just another casualty of bad booking, a monster who couldn't translate his overseas success to the biggest American stage. Instead, by continuing to thrive internationally and becoming an underground favorite among a new generation of wrestling fans, Vader cemented his place as one of wrestling's most influential figures. His career trajectory offers a powerful lesson in wrestling's global nature and the different values of various wrestling cultures. While American promotions often prioritized character and storytelling over in-ring credibility, Japanese promotions recognized that Vader's legitimacy as a physical performer was his greatest asset. They understood that his aura came not from elaborate storylines or catchphrases, but from the very real sense of danger he brought to every match. The same unforgiving style that made Vader a global phenomenon was silently destroying the man behind the character. For all the punishment Leon White delivered in the ring, his body was absorbing an equal or greater amount, and eventually that debt would come due. The physical toll of Vader's career wasn't just about the spectacular moments that made highlight reels. It was the accumulated damage of thousands of bumps, countless stiff shots, and the brutal wear and tear that came with hurling his 450-pound frame around wrestling rings night after night. While fans cheered the monster, the man was breaking down, piece by piece. Weight management became one of White's most persistent struggles throughout his career. The same massive frame that made him intimidating in the ring created serious complications for his health. Carrying 450 pounds, and sometimes more, put tremendous strain on his joints, cardiovascular system, and internal organs. The constant travel schedule of a professional wrestler made maintaining a healthy diet nearly impossible, creating a vicious cycle where his weight exacerbated existing injuries and created new health problems. But physical challenges weren't the only demons White battled. Behind the scenes, alcohol became a destructive force in his life. He developed a particular fondness for tequila that led to some dark moments away from the spotlight. In 2002, those struggles became public when White was arrested for public intoxication following a heavy drinking episode, just one of several brushes with the law that stemmed from his relationship with alcohol. "I had problems with alcohol," White would later admit, acknowledging how substance abuse had affected both his wrestling career and personal relationships. The drinking wasn't just a recreational activity. It became a coping mechanism for the constant pain, the relentless travel schedule, and the pressure of maintaining his fearsome persona. By 2007, the foundation of White's personal life had completely crumbled. After years of alcohol abuse combined with the grueling demands of a global wrestling schedule, his marriage collapsed. For many wrestlers, the end of a relationship becomes just another casualty of the business, but for White, this moment became a turning point. The breakdown of his marriage forced him to confront the destructive patterns that had taken over his life. In the wake of this personal crisis, White made the decision to quit drinking entirely. He also dramatically reduced his travel schedule, recognizing that the constant grind of wrestling shows around the world was destroying what remained of his health. These changes represented a fundamental shift in priorities, a recognition that the man needed to take precedence over the monster. But sometimes life doesn't allow for second chances. In 2016, White was involved in a serious car accident that triggered a cascade of health concerns. What might have been a manageable incident for someone else became the catalyst for a devastating diagnosis for the wrestling legend. Doctors delivered the news that would have broken many men. White was suffering from congestive heart failure. With the directness that had characterized his in-ring persona, White shared this news with fans through Twitter. Told by two heart doctors that my heart is worn out from football and wrestling, he wrote, I have 2 years to live. The prognosis was blunt and terrifying. Doctors had given one of wrestling's most fearsome figures a definitive countdown clock on his remaining time. How does someone respond to being told they have 2 years to live? For White, the answer was pure Vader. Rather than retreating from public life or spending his remaining time in quiet reflection, he approached his diagnosis with the same determination and fighting spirit that had defined his wrestling career. Fans were stunned when, despite his diagnosis, White continued to accept occasional bookings, stepping into the ring even as his health deteriorated. This decision horrified many fans and fellow wrestlers, who feared watching a legend collapse in the ring. But for White, wrestling wasn't just a job. It was fundamental to his identity. The man who had pushed through matches with an eyeball hanging out of its socket wasn't about to let heart failure keep him from the only life he truly understood. It was a final act of defiance against mortality, a refusal to go quietly that perfectly encapsulated the spirit that had made Vader such a compelling figure. In the ring, Vader never surrendered to pain or fear. Facing death, Leon White showed that same unyielding determination. The monster and the man had become inseparable, for better and worse. White's struggle with heart failure became symbolic of a broader truth about professional wrestling. The business takes far more from performers' bodies than fans ever fully comprehend. For every spectacular moment that brings crowds to their feet, there's a physical price that continues long after the cameras stop rolling. The same performances that build legends often ensure those legends won't live to enjoy their elder years. Wrestlers of White's era entered the business with little understanding of the long-term effects their chosen profession would have on their bodies. There were no concussion protocols, no wellness policies, and certainly no one advising super heavyweights about the combined dangers of their size, their style, and the grueling schedule they maintained. They simply performed until they couldn't anymore, often turning to painkillers, alcohol, or other substances to push through another night. For White, the reckoning came later than it might have, a testament to his extraordinary physical constitution. But when it arrived, it came with the finality of a doctor's prognosis that left no room for interpretation. 2 years. The same body that had carried him to championships across 3 continents had reached its breaking point. When death finally came for Leon White on June 18, 2018, it silenced the roar of the monster. But what happens to a legend's influence when the man behind it is gone? While Vader's heart may have failed him in the end, his revolutionary impact continues to beat through the veins of professional wrestling in ways most fans never recognize. The final chapter of Vader's story began with one last battle, this time on the operating table. In 2018, White underwent open heart surgery, a desperate attempt to address the heart condition that had been slowly claiming his life. At 63 years old, the body that had seemingly defied human limitations for decades finally reached its breaking point. The surgery that was meant to extend his life instead became his final match, one even Vader couldn't power through. What followed was something remarkable. A wrestling world divided by promotions, countries, and styles suddenly united in grief. Wrestlers from WWE, New Japan, independent circuits, and retirement all shared stories of the man who had changed what it meant to be a giant in the squared circle. These weren't just the obligatory rest in peace messages that follow any wrestling death. They were deeply personal reflections on a performer who had genuinely altered the trajectory of the business. Perhaps most telling was how competitors spoke of Vader, not just as an opponent, but as a blueprint. Modern super heavyweights like Braun Strowman and Keith Lee didn't just offer condolences. They explicitly acknowledged their debt to the man who had shown that size and agility weren't mutually exclusive. Here were wrestlers who had built their careers on a foundation Vader had constructed decades earlier, combining intimidating size with athletic moves that defy physics. For years after his departure from WWE, the company had maintained a curious distance from Vader's accomplishments, focusing primarily on his relatively brief and underutilized WWF run rather than his revolutionary work elsewhere. This selective memory had left many fans wondering if Vader would ever receive the formal recognition his contributions warranted. The wrestling community's outcry following his death made it increasingly difficult to ignore the elephant in the room. Vader belonged in the WWE Hall of Fame. That recognition finally came in 2022 when Vader was posthumously inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. In an emotional ceremony, his son Jesse White accepted the honor on his father's behalf, standing in for the giant whose shadow had touched every corner of professional wrestling. The induction wasn't just a symbolic gesture. It was the final acknowledgement that Vader's impact transcended promotional boundaries and political considerations. Watch any wrestling event today featuring larger performers, and you'll spot Vader's fingerprints everywhere. The moonsault, that gravity-defying backflip from the top rope, was once considered the exclusive domain of cruiserweights. Vader changed that calculation forever. When 300-pound athletes like Keith Lee execute top rope maneuvers today, they're drawing directly from Vader's revolutionary playbook. What was once shocking has become almost expected, the new standard for what audiences demand from larger wrestlers. The Vader Bomb has become so commonplace that many fans don't even realize its origin. That signature move, climbing to the second rope and launching his entire frame onto a prone opponent, has been adopted and adapted by countless performers. When a big man climbs those ropes today, he's paying homage to a pioneer who dared to defy conventional wisdom about what size and agility could accomplish together. Beyond specific moves, Vader's greater contribution may have been changing the entire expectation for monster heels across the industry. Before Vader, the super heavyweight was typically cast as the slow, plodding obstacle for the hero to overcome, limited in movement and capability. After Vader, audiences would no longer accept such limitations. The modern monster heel is expected to work at a pace and intensity that would have been unthinkable before Vader demonstrated what was possible. This evolution in wrestling style didn't happen through imitation alone. The availability of Vader's match footage has played a crucial role in his ongoing influence. Wrestling training centers across the world regularly study Vader's performances, analyzing how he combined power moves with surprising athleticism. Young wrestlers with size are no longer taught to work like a big man in the traditional limited sense. They're encouraged to push boundaries the way Vader did. What made Vader truly unrepeatable wasn't just his size or his agility. It was his legitimacy. In an era where wrestling's predetermined nature was becoming more widely acknowledged, Vader brought an authenticity that couldn't be faked. His forearm shots really did rock opponents. His power bombs genuinely threatened careers. His intensity wasn't just for show. This combination created something that modern wrestling struggles to replicate: a monster who was truly feared, both in and out of the ring. Perhaps most remarkably, Vader achieved this legendary status without the marketing machine that typically creates wrestling icons. He never had action figures or lunchboxes during his prime. He wasn't featured in video games until late in his career. His most influential work happened in Japan, far from the American television audiences that typically determine wrestling stardom. His legacy wasn't manufactured. It was earned through performances that fundamentally changed what wrestlers and fans believed was possible. The wrestling industry continues to search for the next Vader. That perfect combination of size, athleticism, intensity, and authenticity. But such a performer may never emerge again. Vader was a product of his time, working in an era when wrestling still maintained some mystery, when global styles were just beginning to cross-pollinate, when a performer could build different characters in different territories. The industry has changed too much for another Vader to follow the exact same path. What remains instead is his influence, distributed across generations of performers who each carry a piece of his legacy. Every time a big man flies through the air, every time a monster heel works at a pace that defies expectations, every time a super heavyweight executes a technical move with surprising grace, Vader's vision for what wrestling could be lives on.